everybody, welcome to Akhe Book and Arts Festival 2021 online. My name is Khadija Sanusi, and I'll be talking to Nnamdi Ehirim about his book, Prince of Monkeys. Now, Nnamdi, can you tell us a little bit about the book?
Okay, Prince of Monkeys is my first novel. I can finally say first novel because there are more novels coming, but Prince of Monkeys is my first novel. It's a work of political fiction set in the late 80s and the mid 90s in Nigeria. It tells the story of a group of friends who come from diverse backgrounds, socially, religiously, ethnically, and they grow up together as children in Lagos. And as they grow and mature into adulthood, they get to a position where they need to confront their biases, confront the different toxic things society has taught them as they mature into adulthood, and it's this confrontation that defines their friendship and to a large extent the state of the nation.
All right, thank you. So, what does the title mean, Prince of Monkeys?
Title comes from a passage in the book. It's very metaphorical, and it's hard to explain it out of context, right? So I think I would leave that to the readers for when they do indulge to figure it out.
So, just out of curiosity, what inspired you to write the book?
Let me take it back a bit. Firstly, I had been writing short stories for a while prior to when I decided to write a novel, and I was still in undergrad at the time. And then it was a lofty ambition to one day write a novel. It was something I always wanted to do one day. And there were two influencing factors. One, I was doing my undergrad thesis, and at that point in time, it was very hectic, very strenuous, and I needed something to take my mind away from it when I was working. So at that point, I started writing more, just doing a lot of stuff, fiction, non-fiction. But what made me decide to actually embark on a novel project was I had a playlist I was listening to at the time, and this was 2014-ish, and on my thesis playlist was a lot of Kendrick Lamar, a lot of Chance the Rapper, a lot of SZA, and these were all like young folks who were in their early 20s, like me, and they were creating art on their own terms, and it was finding its audience like halfway across the world. And it was a moment of awakening for me, and I felt, okay, these guys are my age doing like creating the type of art they want to create to like the peak of their dreams. They're not saying, okay, when I'm 40 something I'll embark on making an album. Like they're doing it today and telling their stories today. So I figured, why am I putting off my own like grand dream? Like let me embark on a novel as well. So there was no grand agenda at the start of the book. I had no idea how it was going to end. I had no idea what was going to be on page two when I started writing page one. It was just very, very free flowing. And I would say vibes and inshallah, you know it now. So I would say it took a natural form because at that point in my life, a lot of things were going on. It was very exploratory on a religious level because at that point in my life, I grew up Christian and I had become a bit frustrated with Christianity and just mainstream institutionalized religion. So I was exploring our traditional beliefs, our traditional world systems. I was exploring Islam. I was just learning more about other worldviews. And all of that was crystallized, all of those learnings and thoughts were crystallized into what made up the religious makeup of the book. And it was also the time leading up to the 2015 elections, which were very pivotal in Nigerian history, and it was also very polarizing. And I had friends on each side of the divide as well, and just general like banter, social pop cultural like things that were relevant socially and pop culturally at the time. For me, was also very interesting to capture the pop culture of that time because I feel that era was an era that wasn't written about a lot. That was, like I said, the late 80s and early 90s, and that's almost like a blind spot in Nigerian literature because there was a lot of censorship by the militia regime. A lot of people were in exile. A lot of people weren't just writing fiction about the time because they were scared about possible backlash, right? So, yeah, I felt it was worth exploring and giving an identity to. So these are just like the different moving parts that came together to make up Prince of Monkeys.
So at the beginning, you said the book was primarily for you, but somewhere along the lines, did that change? Did you decide? Did you start thinking of a specific audience you want the book to be written for?
No, like that's a very, very hard no, because like I said, starting off writing this book, I was working on a civil engineering undergraduate thesis, and I was just trying to get my A. After that, I was doing my NYSC, and like in my spare time, I'll flip up my laptop and do some work. And I didn't have an agent at that point. I hadn't even published a short story before, so having an audience and publishing, right, that was far fetched. Like it's the type of thing like my friends already would have joked about, but it wasn't like a tangible dream. There wasn't a clear path to publication. So I think to an extent that allowed me to maintain writing for me. I think for the first, all through the process of writing it, and for the first maybe 2 years after that, it was just a group of friends who I refer to as my mailing list, right? So when I'm working on a story, I'll send them work in progress. They'll give me feedback. The same way like established writers like workshop, or like student writers workshop at an MFA, and established writers like have editors. Like those were my own channels for feedback. So for me, it was if I think it's good, if they think it's good, then it's great. Like I don't think I'm going to like win a Booker Prize with this. If I one day get published, all well and good. But if not, this will probably just remain on my hard drive, and I'll show my children and say one day I wrote a book, that kind of thing.
Can you describe the portrait of prison monkeys?
I think firstly, my decision to introduce colors into it was the early part of the book, where colors are very significant. I'm writing from the perspective of a young boy. At sometimes he's a child, at sometimes he's a young teenager, and I wanted to like portray how I saw life at that point in time. Like things were very, very from a very certain lens. It wasn't too serious. It was very playful. It was mixing and matching different things. Like everything, for something to be relevant, I needed to be able to tie it to something on my level, which was something playful or something artistic or something creative. Something grand on its own just couldn't exist. For example, like money on its own couldn't be relevant to me because I didn't spend money. I didn't have money to spend. Money was only relevant if I heard my dad say something funny about money, and I could tie that reference to something close to me as a child. And colors was something I could use as that pivot, right? So that was my motivation for such strong references to color. And regarding your question regarding the different colors that make of part of the book, so it was my own exploration of my own experiences, interrogating new religions and world systems, interrogating politics. That was the first time I was getting like politically involved on a very low level, at least in conversations, interrogating friendships as well. So I mean, for the most part, I made friends. Prior to that, I made friends in school, or the people I played ball with, or the people I met at parties. This was the first time, like, we had to discuss serious issues and confront each other's actual ideas regarding life. And it wasn't as smooth as one would have imagined, right? This was like the first true, pure conflict, right? That threatened friendships. And I felt all of that was what represented. So I think those are I'd say the different colors, using colors as a metaphor that made up the portrait of the novel. And I think a lot of this conflict is also reflected in the conflicts that goes on between the different characters in the story as well.
I'm going back to your relationship with religion and growing up. I know that you experienced different parts of Nigeria when you were growing up. So now I want to ask, what were the colors of your childhood?
Ah, 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 definitely say um, was green. Like green was the most, the actual like specific color. Green was the most dominant color of my childhood. Firstly, because I lived in Lagos for a while, and Lagos is not is not the most green place. But somehow my school uniform was green, which is a very unusual color for a school uniform. If you scout my social media pages like well enough, you see
It's
something.
there,
Yes,
yeah.
and it's a really cute picture. Like puberty wasn't as kind, but it was a really cute picture. So green was my primary school. And I was also very big on football. Like I would come back, eat, do my assignments as diligently as I could, because by 4 was when I was let out to go play. And if I wasn't done with everything by 4, I couldn't go out. So like my entire life was to make sure I was ready for 4 o'clock, like to go play football by 4 o'clock. And like everywhere is green when you play football. Like the field is green. Moving to Enugu as well. Enugu is a very green city. It has hills, it has a lot of red sand, but it also has a lot more greenery than Lagos. I can remember the first time I drove into Enugu, like when we were moving there, and we left in the morning, we went by road, we got there but at night, and um the house was in GRA, and driving through GRA there was just greenery everywhere, and I literally thought like we were in the forest. And the driver stopped and said, okay, we are home. And I'm like, this can't be home. Like this literally can't be home. Like why are trees here? Like why can't I see my neighbor's house? So yeah, that's
Mm,
exactly how green it was. So by like easily by a clear mile, green was the primary color of my childhood.
that's really lovely. Well, green is Nigeria's color also, so that's good.
That's too.
So you grew up in Omole like the protagonist. Are there events in the book that are non-fictional? Are there stories from your own childhood that Ehechi can relate to or other characters in your book?
Definitely not part of the plot were real, but different things that made up the background of the stories, things
Mm-hmm.
that made up the world the characters lived in were based on reality. For example, I remember like this really huge, like coming across this really huge house and just being amazed how like one person could live in this house. And my friend is like, oh yeah, this is my house, and we go in and there's a cook and there's everything. And coming from like Lagos, a block of flats, like that was like life changing, right? And I remember just parts of my childhood where I'll go to my cousin's house, and there was this guy who had like mental health issues, and he was homeless and he was by the road. And we would all play, but we're all very wary of him because there was this legend that like the guy, a similar character in the novel, he was called Professor because there was this legend that he used to be this math whiz, and he had mental health issues and he became homeless, and he ran around with a pencil trying to stab little children. So that also was reflected in the book. And there were things like I mean, the characters played football a lot when they evolved and started going to the shrine a lot, just as a central place to hang out and just enjoy the ambience, the music, and just about casual stuff. That was also informed by experiences that I went through as well. But regarding like actual plot events, something happening to a character, getting into fights, none of that was based on reality.
Well, let's hope so. All right. So I've told you before that I think the most important sentence is your in your book is about how people define culture and not the other way around. But so many times you see that people allow culture to define them, who they are, their values, and the way that they live their lives. So my question is, what are the consequences of doing that? What are the consequences of allowing culture define you and not the other way around?
I think the primary consequence is you're stuck in the past because, like you rightly said, or like you rightly agreed with, people define culture, and the culture that we hold there and we hold as dogma, right, was defined by people who lived in a world in the past. And what they defined as dogma was meant to guide their lives and guide their interactions with each other for that particular time. But the thing is, people evolve and the world evolves, and the way we interact with each other evolves. And if we are still playing a 2021 game with rules that are so outdated, it limits what we can achieve. It limits what we can aspire to. It limits how we can improve as a society and how we can improve the way we interact with each other, especially where we can see like very clear hindrances of these cultures. So, for example, when you see bigotry or patriarchy enshrined in culture, and we can see how it limited the societies that existed then, and we refuse to evolve as necessary, then we are deliberately stunting our own growth as a society. And I think that's the major consequence of living in the past and holding on to culture in certain ways.
Do you think this has to do with colonization? I wouldn't say colonization defined our culture or told us what our culture should be, but it had a huge impact on the way we see ourselves, especially the way we see women in today's society. What do you think?
I think in many ways, what I would say I believe is the strongest impact of colonization is colonization took a sense of culture away from us, our sense of identity away from us. And in the post colonial world, when people are trying to regain identity and reclaim identity, they tend to hold on to what the identity was before colonization.
Mhm.
However, that was over 100 years ago. And that society was over 100 years ago. The rules and terms of engagement there were clearly for a different time. I think while it is useful to use that identity as a starting point, that cannot be the end point of what we use to define ourselves and our new identity. I think there's a very new need to redefine a new identity. I mean, prior to colonization, there was no Nigeria. Like, so there was an Igbo identity and a Fulani identity and a Yoruba identity, but there was no
Mhm.
Nigerian identity. And we can see people in this post-colonial world um, reclaiming their Yoruba identity and reclaiming their Fulani identity and their Igbo identity. However, there hasn't been any true and groundbreaking effort to create a Nigerian identity, and we can say that has been at the root of a lot of our issues today.
Okay, but so what would be the Nigerian identity? Because being Nigerian itself is a product of colonization. So what is the Nigerian identity? What would it look like ideally?
That is a very hard question, right? It's very, very layered and loaded. It involves, it takes on many assumptions, right? Like it takes on, um, the primary assumption it takes on is that I, for one, as a person, feel the need to hold on to or claim a Nigerian identity. But working with that assumption, right, I would say what is called to the Nigerian identity is something that is a lot more accommodating. The Nigerian identity is a sum of its many parts. There should be a very, very clear and honest drive for inclusivity. So there has to be a lot of trust. And for that, there has to be a lot of honest confrontation of misdeeds. So I hurt you in the past, and this is how like I want to appease and reconcile going forward. There has to be a lot of trust where I can safely say you are looking out for my well-being as much as you are looking out for your well-being. And before you can now begin to accommodate your neighbor, you can't accommodate a neighbor you don't trust. You can't work with a neighbor you don't trust. So there has to be a lot of one, reconciliation, two, a lot of accommodation and mutual trust, and then we could work together to something that's close to a national identity.
Well, let's hope this is everybody's independence wish this year.
Amen. Amen.
So honestly, so Ehechi has a very interesting relationship with religion, and you've mentioned religion earlier in the interview. So one of his best friends is a pastor's son. His mother is a traditional African religion worshiper. To what extent does that plurality of religion in his life affect his own religiosity? And by extension, yours as well, because you've mentioned that you've also um, what's the word? You've also, I don't see, you've also interacted with a lot of religions over the years.
Okay, so um, that's a very interesting question. And Ihechi as the main character um, on his own was very irreligious because I wanted the narration of the book to be very irreligious, to be an examination of, to be as close to an unbiased examination of the different religions that make up our society. So that was the primary motivation for his irreligiosity. And how it aligns with mine is in the sense that, to a large extent, he doesn't find answers anywhere. He's very understanding and empathetic of each worldview. He understands why his mother needs to hold on to. If He understands why Pastor's son is the way he is because of the way he was brought up. He understands justice different many parts of everybody and why it's relevant to them. And he lives with them. He's not judgmental. He's very accommodating to a large degree. He's very trusting as well. However, he's never really convinced that any of these particular sides answer all of the questions he has regarding life. When he's speaking with his mom, he expresses frustration. When he speaks to pastor's son, he expresses frustration as well. And just even on his own, like with many musings, he does express frustration. And you can see there's a clear need for him. There's still a clear need for I would say religious alliance, right? Or something to hold on to, because when he speaks to Mendos, for example, who is probably the most irreligious character in the book, he still expresses like a need or a desire for something to hold on to. However, he hasn't really found anything and he's still searching. And I think that would clearly define my own stance with, or rather, my own relationship with religion.
Do you think that was aided, or do you think that was aided by his relationship with Zinat? No, because she also goes around the world just not caring about religion per se because of her own background
Fair
and
enough.
the people that she grew up with. So she has a very indifferent attitude to life where, you know what, whatever happens, happens. She's not trying to hold on to something.
Yeah, it's very interesting you bring that up, because I definitely wouldn't say that was a clear motive, but I could definitely see, I could definitely like follow your train of thought, because prior to his meeting Zenat, he was very by the book, and he was like, he would obey his mother and 100% like buy into everything he was brought up to believe. And Zenat was the first person that made him think and say, oh wait, like why do I have to do this? Like she was someone who for many reasons lived for herself first. So she truly wanted to make herself happy, and that was her guiding light. His guiding light was, what would my mother say? What would this person say? Like what is right, what is wrong? She primarily wanted to be happy first. And that was the first time he was open to that. And in many ways that also influenced him as well. Because over like a short period, like after they started interacting, he started questioning his own um stances on many things and why he believed many things, and he started buying into a very free spirited way of living as well.
So he joined Bad Gang.
Exactly.
Okay, but how would you describe AH's relationship with spirituality?
His religion with spirituality, like I said, is very, very unfulfilling. He has tried and he has failed, and to a large extent he's still open to salvation of some sort in whatever form he comes. However, it's not something he has grasped yet.
So let's go back to AH's childhood. If he hadn't reunited with them after all these years, do you think he would have questioned himself?
I would say no, because when he came out of that ward and he was forced out of that ward and sent to Enugu to live with his uncle, that was a major turning point, and that sent him on another direction. To be fair, the same way his life, or rather the same way his childhood was shaped by his friends and those early interactions, the next phase of his life in Enugu was shaped by that new community as well. When he started interacting with his uncle, who was more present than his father, began to learn a lot about his personal identity and his family history, and that made him more understanding of his father and his family. When he started interacting with his cousins, and Tessie, for example, she was very, very eyes on the money and eyes on the bag, and trying to like make as much out of her life as possible. And that was also the first time he bought into that and became selfish in that regard and wanted to make something out of his own life in that regard. So she shaped, or rather, that new community shaped his journey as well. And definitely, in many ways, moving back to Lagos and having these chance meetings with his different friends who shaped his childhood, helped him center what was truly important to him in the beginning, right? It gave him a true sense of purpose again, and like you said, it really changed the trajectory of his life.
He really did. And it was very interesting to see that. So, do you think the anti government riot that took place earlier in the book had any impact on Heritage future and his working for a corrupt army general?
In the sense that that sent him on the spiral that ended up like taking him away from his group of friends and to Enugu. Yes, in very very clear terms, the riot did affect him, but also like the that event was the event that politicized his life. Like before then, like you said, it was vibes and inshallah. Like he just wanted to have a good time with his friends. They would go to the shrine, like they would smoke, they would drink, they would discuss music, they would see movies together. Like their life was very, um, very childlike, and that was the true coming of age moments. That was the first time that they were forced, and I use that word forced because that's what it was. They were forced to look at the world outside them and realize that beyond their little bubble that they existed in, a lot of shit was going on, for lack of a better word. And this like it worked both ways. It influenced their life, and one or rather two, he realized he could influence these things, especially when he moved to Enugu and he was exposed to the political people and the business people. He saw the way they could tinker with things and actually like affect or rather affect what goes on in society, and it was something he began to aspire to. And in many ways his friends also um, grew in their own paths. Pastor Son, for example, grew to head his father's church after his father passed, and he grew to understand how he could use his position as an influential political, rather influential Pentecostal pastor to influence things. Mendos, who became a revolutionary of some sort, also learned how he could use his own charisma to effect change in society and pretty much just a need for change to inspire people. So everyone, I'd say, developed their own tools for affecting society. But the anti-government riots that affected them all at the beginning was the true moment that politicized them all.
Well, that true moment that you're talking about, thank you for bringing us. Why did Zenat have to die? Why?
So I think I need to say this like on behalf of every writer out there who writes for themselves, right? And writes to have a great story. Like at the back of your head, you want stories people can relate to, you want stories that make people happy or sad. But at the like very foundation of it all, you want a good story. And the things that make a good story is pulling on certain strings, right? The same way, like if you're playing a keyboard, you know you have to follow, like you have to like follow melody, like to make your listeners happy, right? You need to follow certain, you need to pull certain strings as well when you're writing a book. And killing Zenat was for the sake of the plot. Like I'm not going to patronize you and give you any emotional or philosophical angle to it. Murdering Zenat was for the sake of the plot. Like we needed to have this effect, that we needed to create this effect that you have had and you felt so dearly, and someone had to die. Someone had to die.
Okay, but why Zenat though? It could have been anybody. I would have been fine if it was Pastor's son or Mendos, but she was the one female in the group.
I definitely didn't look at it from a gender angle, but what I did look at was in the way Nigeria kills dreams. It's really the most free spirited people and the people who have lost for life that end up getting destroyed by this country, right? People who are scheming and who can understand like there's a game to be played and who can wield certain identities and certain alliances for survival's sake. Those people do well in Nigeria. The people who suffer Nigeria the most are the people who all they have is pure, unadulterated dreams. And Zenat was that character. She was the person, yes, she was the only woman in the group, but she was really the only person who, like I said, had a pure lust for life and just wanted to be happy. She didn't aspire to clout or wealth or even like there wasn't ever a conversation of success or this is what I believe in. It was just this is the moment and I really want to make the best of it. And Nigeria doesn't see that and let that thrive. So she had to be the one.
And looking at her background as well, it was very sad because, she has this very sad background and she had an opportunity to do
The
well
right-
in life. And
Yeah, yeah.
all right, so the problems that caused the riots and political upheaval in Prince of Monkeys are very synonymous with the ones that caused the NSAS protests in 2020. In your opinion, what is the relevance of your book to modern day?
The first thing is it's sad because like writing that story, one of the main motivations for not setting it in the present was I didn't want it to be a direct mirror of like this present government. If I was writing a political book in the present, I wouldn't have been able to avoid critiquing the political space as it is today. What I wanted to do was I don't want to point my finger at certain individuals. I just point my finger at the system because I feel it is a systematic issue. And it's sad to see that holding up a mirror to the late 80s and the early 90s, and you can still see clear similarities when you hold up a mirror to Nigeria in 2020. So, firstly, it's sad in that regard that there's been very little progress. Secondly, I think the book shows that every approach is valid. So, for example, EHE had his own belief that he truly believed that political participation was the way to change in the country. Pastor Son believed the solution was to pray our way out of the problems we had. Mendos believed bloody revolution was the valid way, and everybody had their own approach, right? And everybody's approach was futile at the end of the day. However, I wanted to portray a reality that every approach is valid as long as you are making strides. If you genuinely believe prayer is the way and prayer has worked for you, keep doing so. For those who believe political participation is the way, I feel there is a role political participation has to play, to be honest. So we actually need people who honestly believe that and who pursue the avenue. However, we also need people who will burn down the house, who will say this is wrong, and by our blood we wouldn't stand by this. Like we would rather die than see the status quo continue. I feel every cog to the wheel is relevant to driving social change. And I feel that's one thing. If there's a message I'd want to hold up as like to say this is still relevant today, because in the NSAS protest, we saw people who weren't in the country participate by donating. We saw people who could actually go to the streets, protest and go to the streets. We saw people who could go to police stations and swing their personal relationships to set people in jail free. Like everybody participated in the way they could, and we actually. I mean, yes, it ended the way it ended, but we actually, for the first time, saw the needle moving. And this was because everybody followed the road to the market that they knew best. And we arrived at that common point of like that mass movement where we could finally like drive something and cause a change.
Okay, so there's this anti-hero complex attitude that Ihechi and his mother have. At the very beginning, he told Pastor Son, I've tried to get on the Save the World boat you're on, and it doesn't really work for me. And he goes, not every shoulder is was built to carry the weight of the world. And then later in the text, his mother tells him Nigeria doesn't need heroes. Those who think Nigeria needs heroes should bring up their children to be heroes. They shouldn't steal my child. My own upbringing in Nigeria and what I've seen with people around me, Nigerians and their parents have this idea of we don't have to be the heroes Nigeria needs. Nigeria has problems. Nigeria needs heroes, but we don't have to be. What's your take on that? I understand that it's trying to protect their kids, but if every parent shies away from having their child be heroes, then who is going to be the hero?
Firstly, I think I would say Like for the average Nigerian like the average Nigerian parent, for example, who thinks like he hates his mom. If you think Nigeria needs heroes, bring up your child to be a hero. Don't steal my own child. I think that's a very valid train of thought, to be honest. Like that's a logical thing because Nigeria is not a Marvel movie. In Nigeria, heroes die. Like heroes don't make it to the end of the flick. Like that's the honest truth of Nigeria. And you either like bend or you get out. So I can understand anybody who would have that mindset. However, the truth is institutions make up a country and people make up institutions. And I think hero may be too grand a word because it comes off as one person wielding a sword or with superpowers that no one else has and taking the responsibility of the entire country on his back. No, Nigeria needs many good people, like people who not necessarily have superpowers. They have the nobility of heroes. Heroes will stand by good regardless, almost to a very, very naive point. Heroes will stand by good. And I think that's what Nigeria needs. I don't think we can have enough people with nobility of vision who refuse to be corrupted, and that's what we need. I mean, you could say it's grand or it's naive. Now, in hindsight, you could say these people were flawed. You could say the founding fathers of America were racist and this and that is all well and good. But we also have to admit that they had a very, very noble vision where they left the place they were at. Like they had the starting point and they said we want to make something for ourselves and for our people and for our society. And you can say the vision they had wasn't the most idealistic vision, seeing the way things turned out, but they had a clear nobility of vision, and they stood with integrity as they went towards that vision. I think that's what we need. Not necessarily. I mean, we could all sit here and argue about what the vision for Nigeria should be and what the national identity and vision should be. But at the center of it, I think we need integrity and the ability to pursue that vision. And currently, we just don't have enough people who have that.
Okay, so I agree that we don't have it at the moment, but what about then at the time where your book is set? Are there Nigerian heroes that you would want to give a shout out to?
There wouldn't be any conversation about heroes of that era if you don't speak about all of the people who died for the ideal, right? We say we don't have enough people with integrity and enough people with nobility of vision, but there were a few people who had that and they lost their lives because of it. There were journalists, there were people who started political parties, people who started youth movements, right? In different parts of the country. There were market women leaders, like there were people at all levels of society, too many to be mentioned, and who lost their lives because they had an ideal they believed in, because they could either bend or stand with integrity, and they stood with integrity. And I think these are the people who are true heroes. These are the people whose ideals and nobility we would want to aspire to, never minding the way it ended for them.
Well, oh, sorry, these are people like
But,
Falakuti because
so like Fela Kuti, who was mentioned in the book, who was a very strong reference point. But there was Bola Ige, there was Dele Giwa. There were people, I'm sure, like, if it's the type of thing where if you speak well enough to your parents or people who lived as conscious adults through that time, everybody knows the story of, everybody knows someone, right? Either a family friend who was very outspoken, who was cowered into silence. Everybody knows someone who was very, very loud and true and honest in their youth. And maybe some way, like they either had to leave Nigeria or they were brutalized into conformity by the Nigerian system, right? These are people who are very, very similar and who could be considered as heroes as well, or rather heroes of the time.
and judging by your definition, we can see heroes of our time were people who protested and people who were killed.
Exactly. And I think this is a very pivotal conversation to have, especially because we are just coming around to the 1 year anniversary of everything that happened. For the first time in my own life, that was the first time I could see a lot of Nigerians coming together for a true, honest purpose to make Nigeria better, right? And while it was something that was new to me, speaking to my parents, like they would always say, we felt this before, like what you guys are feeling in this moment, we felt this before, and we felt it and we lost hope, and we didn't think like this spirits could come up again, and it did. And for me, like I think the lesson from it should be to lose hope, to believe that that is just a starting point, and as opposed to losing faith, to build on like what happened, and building, like I said, there are many ways to build on it, like by further protest, by further like political participation. Like everyone should pick what they can do. If it's sponsoring people, if it's going to the streets, if it's praying for people, like whatever you have the resources to do, and whatever you believe is the right path to the market, absolutely take that path.
So, Namdi, earlier you spoke about accountability and how apologies and conversations can go a long way. Do you think this could work in Nigeria 1 year after the NSAS protests? Do you think should the federal government come out and apologize and own up to everything and take accountability? Do you think Nigeria would be in a better place than it was this time last year?
Oh, definitely. I definitely think if the federal government, if the Nigerian police force could come out and take accountability for not just the event of October 20th, but everything leading up to that, all of the accusations, all of the allegations, rather. And if there could be like an honest confrontation of grievances, definitely that would go a long way into building trust and bridging the gap between the people and those in power. However, I don't think that is a realistic expectation. Like, I don't think there's anything we've seen over the past 12 months to make us believe that would happen. However, I think in terms of making conversation, like you alluded to, something that can be done is expanding the scope of the conversation. So, for example, um, a lot of the a lot of the post protest reporting and post protest coverage and just like everything that happened was very centered on the Lekki narrative and the Lagos narrative. However, the protest was nationwide. The grievances were nationwide. It was a nationwide movement. There were people in Enugu, in Imo, in Abuja, in Kano, in Jos, in Oyo State. I feel, and I mean, there were lots of lives in this place. There were lots of property. There were people were missing. Like the same things that we are mourning in Lagos happen nationwide. So I think, firstly, in terms of expanding the scope of the conversation, we need to expand the reach of what we cover, what we document. We need to document it properly, and also just in terms of giving voices to people who are still doing work locally. So there are people who are still doing work in Lagos to meet the needs of people who lost, and also just to drive social change, to hold the police more accountable, hold the government more accountable. There are people outside Lagos as well in all of these places, and we can see what was achieved when the voices of those in Lagos was amplified, when the voice of FEMCO was amplified. Like we can see what it led to. I feel if in a similar vein, we can amplify the voices of people walking around the nation. I think in many ways, FEMCO showed what was possible. FEMCO showed the power of organizing and supporting an organization to drive social change. I think that could be a template for going forward. And they also help by being accountable themselves and holding themselves to high standards of integrity and transparency. So I think a lot of what happened then could be scaled nationwide. So it wouldn't just be a Lagosian movement, but a truly Nigerian movement. And we don't end up in a situation end up in the situation of our parents' generation where there was a move for change that was forgotten. We need it properly documented. We need to build on the lessons we've learned for like a greater tomorrow.
It's just interesting that your book is very relevant to NSAS and the anti-government riot and all of these things. But the thing is, if everybody like Ehechi and his mom were to share away from being heroes, then who would save Nigeria?
Apparently, nobody saved Nigeria in the end, as we can all see, right? And again, like we say, it's not because people didn't try. Like people tried and people died. And as long as the Nigerian ideal exists, the fight for a better Nigeria would exist. And I draw those words from Frederick Forsyth's book, The Biafra Story, where he was speaking on the Biafra War and aftermath of it. So he spent 3 years with Ojukwu, and he documented the people. And there was a particular way he ended the book saying, it's very easy to say this was a corrupt movement and this and that, but he walked the streets and he saw the people, and he saw the desire for that independent nationhood with them. And as long as the problems that caused them to feel insecure in Nigeria and feel let down by Nigeria, as long as those problems persist, then that desire for self-determination will persist. And as long as that desire for self-determination persists, then Biafra would live on. Like whether or not their flags been flown, whether or not it's Nnamdi Kanu or Emeka Ojukwu, as long as that desire for self-determination exists, then in someone's heart, Biafra will still be alive. And I think you could draw similar parallels with Nigeria. So, for example, like we can see that the same grievances that affected Echi and his friends and affected Nigeria of the 80s and 90s are still alive in 2022. And as long as those grievances are still present, then a desire for a better Nigeria will be present. And as long as that desire for a better Nigeria will be present, then the ideal Nigeria would exist in someone's heart, and it will exist in the hearts of many people, and they would keep aspiring to it. It may be different people, but it would be the same ideal.
All right. So, what do you think happened to the characters after the book ended? So, if you were to write one more page, what would be on it?
That's a very interesting question, because I did consider writing a sequel after a while, but there would be no sequel. There would be no sequel. What I decided to do was, somewhere in the background as an inconsequential character would be someone from the world of Prince of Monkeys, which is to pretty much show that after everything they went through, like after all they suffered for and fought for, like for a better Nigeria, nothing happened and their lives just went on like inconsequentially, which is the true reality. Like we have people in Nigeria who fought and who protested in the past and did like so many great things for the sake of the country, and you walk past those people every day and you don't know who they are, you don't know their stories, you don't know what they've done, you don't know the dreams they had, the ideals they held on to. They are just very inconsequential in Nigeria of 2021. Like there are names that our parents would probably mention and you will ring a bell because these people stood for something back then. That if you say that name in front of a million Nigerians today, like 90% of them wouldn't know what you're talking about. There wasn't a desire to continue telling the story of their fight. It's more like a desire to show Nigeria betrays like our ambition and betrays our dreams, and how for the large part a generation of people stood and fought for something and it was made largely inconsequential. I think the beautiful thing about life is no matter how idealistic um, Nigeria becomes, no matter how much progress we make, the honest truth is our children and grandchildren will find something to protest about, because that's society. Standards evolve. Like the standards our grandparents held themselves to in the 1980s or in the 1890s and the same standards we hold ourselves to today. Like there were many things, for example, like people were killing twins in the 1800s in Nigeria. People don't do that anymore. Like if there are today people protest, nobody was protesting about it in the 1800s. So like no matter the progress we make, I think there will still be protests. I think there will still be grievances. I think there will still be a fight for an ideal in Nigeria, because, like we said, people make culture and ideals evolve as they should be.
So you mentioned at the very beginning that you have a new project coming on, a new book. Do you want to tell us a little about that?
I mean, I think first, one thing I would say is after writing Prince of Monkeys, I had a lot of book chats like this, which started out as book chats, but ended up as political conversations and idealistic conversations. And to be fair, I was done. So I'm like, I do not want to have like more of this conversation. So I'm not writing another type of like this type of book. So my second book is way more human. Like it's based around human relationships and less around human ideas. There's a lot more drama and intrigue and just the basic things that make us feel the way we feel. In many ways, it's similar to Prince of Monkeys in the sense that it tells the story of a group of friends. It shows them at a young point in their life, and it shows how their lives and their relationships with each other evolve over time. But it is less to do with their interaction with society and the ideas they have, and more to do with their actual relationships with each other and their strive for morality, for being good people to themselves and to each other, and how just good intentions don't always translate to having good consequences.
Let's see. If you were to give advice to upcoming writers or people that want to write a book, what's the one piece of advice that you would give them from your experience? What's one thing you've learned about writing and publishing that you want to pass on to people?
I would say, firstly, commit the hours. I think the only true rule to getting good at writing is putting in the hours. Put in the hours to reading, right? Reading things you enjoy, not necessarily reading Shakespeare because they said you should read Shakespeare. Reading things you enjoy. Putting in the hours to writing things you enjoy. So not necessarily writing what the type of fiction or non-fiction that is popular, but writing what you enjoy. Putting in the hours into truly living, because you actually need a well to draw from. You need a full well to be able to draw from it. So you have to put in the hours and commit to your craft. That's the one true rule. The second thing I would say is there are nothing else is set in stone. Other than putting in the hours, nothing else is set in stone. There are only guidelines and best practices. What works for A or B may not necessarily work for C. So when you put in the hours, you figure out what works for you and you figure out what to build on. Also, I could say work with community, um, especially when or rather after you find your voice. Um, like let people hear your voice. Let them tell you how nice it sounds, but let them also tell you how you could adjust your pitch and how you could train your range. Be very open to feedback, especially when you get to a point where you're very comfortable with your voice. A lot of people say be open to feedback as you find your voice, but even after finding your voice, it's very easy to get stuck to say, this is how I want to write. But especially at that point, you should be open to feedback as well.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much, Nnamdi, for this wonderful interview. Thank you for your time, and thank you to Ake Festival and the people who put it together.
Thank you very much for having me. This is my first book chat with Ake, and especially like coming from someone who started going to Ake as a reader and as someone who just wanted to be a fan. Like this is very big for me. So thank you, Ake, and thank you, Khadija, for your time and for your very interesting questions.
I just want to say, I think it's a bit poetic that we're here at Ake discussing your book because we met at Ake when your book was first published. And so I think Auntie Lola did it on purpose.
I mean, I'm happy for that, and I think that's the more than anything, that's the beauty of Ake. The community it provides for people who have similar interests in literature and in the arts. So hopefully, this time next year we would be doing Ake in person and just experiencing in community more and more. So
Okay.
till then, cheers.
Till then, thank you so much. Thank you.
Let me introduce a new wave, we change the rules. A new app that you can use. Wanna change your life, then choose. Save money and invest. Pay bills when you decide. Safe and secure for you when you need a loan. Request it. One bank for you, one bank for me. So chill and enjoy the ride. Stop the current account on it. One bank.
One Bank by Sterling. Open a current account and start transacting.